Well, hello everybody. This is Bob Ost. I'm back. I'm back. I've been away for 3.5 weeks. I was on a Danube cruise, a Danube River cruise. How about that? The biggest vacation I've ever actually taken in my life. And it was exhausting. It was exciting, but it was exhausting. So here I am, back from the Danube and back at True, and so happy to be here and so happy to see my friends here. Um, I hope that John Lance, Sandy Sandy Silverberg. I have to learn how to pronounce the name of my chairman of the board. It really would become something very handy to be able to do. And Kate Camerata, I hope that they all kept the conversations going in the past 3 weeks, and I hope you enjoyed them and enjoy the conversations. Um, for those of you in YouTube and podcast land out there who are new to us and have just found us, welcome. I'm glad you found us. Thank you. I run a company called Theater Resources Unlimited. We are a company that's dedicated to doing arts services for the arts community, specifically for theater. We help producers and we help everybody else in the theater world understand and how to navigate the business of theater. So that's who we are, and that's why we're here. April 17th, 2020, a funny thing happened. We opened up a Zoom room because there was something out there called COVID, and there was no way to do live programming. So we started doing Zoom programming, and here I am 161 weeks later, where we've managed to do consecutive weeks of our programming. So we've been talking about a lot of things. Of course we have. It's 161 weeks. We had to be talking about something, right? So the things started off, we were really trying to find out how to survive shutdown and quarantine, and everybody was a little freaked out. And it proved to be a comfort and a gift for the community for us to have a room where people could come and be together and talk about what they were going through. So I wasn't expecting to be doing this 3 years later, but here I am. I'm happy to serve the community, and I'm very honored that people come into this room every week. We get normally between 30 and 90 people a week who come to these meetings, these conversations. So early on, we were talking about Zoom and virtual and alternatives to live theater, and what do we do when we just get tired of actually just pulling the covers over our heads in bed. So we talked about different ways of being creative and different aspects of theater and storytelling. We really became fixated on the idea of storytelling and how it doesn't necessarily need a live audience to be effective storytelling. We've looked at all sorts of things. And yes, we've even talked about social media over the years, before COVID and since April 17th, 2020. Today, we're going to have a different conversation because I'm going to out myself. I'm not on TikTok. So we're actually going to talk about social influencers. We're going to talk about social media in general, but TikTok is going to be a really big part of the conversation. And without any further ado, actually, I want to bring in, well, I do want to say one other thing. If you want to be part of the conversation and be in the room, I can make that happen. All you have to do is email me. Yes, email me at trunltd@aol.com. And I'll put you on a list and we'll send you a link every week and you can be part of this. Hopefully you'll enjoy this conversation with the people I'm about to introduce you to. One is a friend of True and a member of True and somebody that we've gotten to know basically over the last 3 years, isn't it, Nico?
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's another point I want to bring up, because Nico's not in New York. So before COVID, we were a New York-based organization. And then we opened up a Zoom room, and suddenly we had people from all over the country and all over the world coming in. And that matters. That's a good thing. I'm very proud of it, and I'm very happy about this unexpected development. So Nico's a playwright, composer, lyricist. You do all three, don't you?
I do everything.
Yeah, we're gonna have a therapy session about that. But yeah,
Yeah.
okay. I do too. Those of you who don't write, um, it's it's so much. It's so hard to do all three, book, music, and lyrics, especially when you get into production and you have to be three different people. But that's another story for another day. So Nico's here, and Nico said to me, "Why don't we talk about influencers?" And I said, "Because I don't know any." Uh, and she happens to know a social media influencer, a guy named Brandon Powers. So Brandon, say hi to us and introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your background, and then I'm going to introduce Nico again. But I want to get a little background about what we're going to be talking about, which is social media influencers, not only, but other things as well. So
Ab-
tell me, what questions am I going to be asking you?
Sure. Hi, it's great to be here. Thanks so much for having me and be a part of this conversation. This is among some of my favorite things to talk about in the world, and so I'm looking forward to it together. I'm Brandon Powers. I am a creative director and choreographer, and I create work at the intersection of technology and performance. And I do a lot of work in the extended reality space, combining immersive technology with performance, and also have a large part of my life sharing online with my community on TikTok, where I have over 70,000 followers, and have been building there for the last few years. And all of these different things, thinking about how to really build communities online through multiple mediums, brought me to found a company called Constellation. And Constellation is a community building organization where we think about cohesive strategy in order to build out your theatrical brand long before it heads to a large scale production. We really believe that the stage show is your nexus event, not the only event, and that you should be building communities actively online long before you ever maybe make it to Broadway or elsewhere, in order to build that audience.
I'm gonna ask for clarification. What do you mean by nexus?
Yeah, so nexus meaning that while you may be, right now you're writing your stage musical, we help you think about cohesively your entire world building brand, right? So while you might be writing the stage show right now, we're going to help strategize about building your online digital community that might live through TikTok, through platforms like Discord, Instagram. How can your story also live in virtual reality? How can your story also live in a podcast? How can it live in a unique format or community or club that fits your brand, right? And that it's not just copies of all of those things everywhere. It's actually new extensions of the brand. And that's what's going to drive people to actually fall in love with your show and make them want to buy tickets when you get down to it.
So we're gonna come back to a lot of that, and what I do want to bring we're gonna come back to hopefully all of that if I remember it all. My brain. Okay. Oh, people are gonna pop in on screen every now and then. What are we gonna do about it? No matter how many times I tell people to enter the room with your video off, they don't do that. So Nico, I want to come back to you because actually I'm thinking that a good strategy for this conversation would be to start with your relationship with Brandon. And once we talk about the specifics of your show and the specifics of how you have branded your show and how Brandon branded how Brandon branded you. Did you pick that name on purpose, or did you have the name and decide to go into branding?
It just happened that way,
Okay. So we'll talk about the specifics, and then we'll be able to get into more general conversations about and also questions from the room about different aspects of social media. I do want to start with the concept of influencer, and the reason I want to start with that is because I've heard it for years. I've had at least one or two, if not more, panels and discussions every year about social media. The things that we've traditionally been told about social media is that it's not a ticket selling environment. It's a an awareness building environment, and people have to understand the difference between the two. And I want to basically know more about influencers, because right now in my life they're just sort of like a rumor. I've heard there are such things. But Nico, let's start with you. Let's talk about your background and you as a writer and your show.
Yeah, I'll give everyone kind of the real brief overview of me, although I know a lot of the folks here, but I know this will exist online too. So before I made the jump into theater, I worked in marketing and high tech. I was at Apple, I was at Adobe for 13 years. I worked at a company called ServiceNow. So I come from a really strong marketing branding background and still do some of that kind of freelance work, but took that mindset into this industry. I also genetically come from a family of comedy writers and musicians, and so have this very strange set of skills that have intersected in one person. But I had my millennial existential crisis. I wrote a musical called Millennials Are Killing Musicals, started about 5 years ago, and have been on this journey, as Bob talked about, this horrible timing of when I really came into the business and everything shut down. And although having these outlets like True and being able to network and social media and kind of see the lay of the land that way, I wasn't afraid to try things that people hadn't tried before. So virtual development, I did that kind of really early on before some other people were, with using equity actors and equity contracts. And then was a member of the PDMP program in True, which I highly, highly recommend. I did both the foundations and masterclass. And still thinking about ways of kind of getting the word out there in non-traditional ways. I knew I had this off-Broadway developmental production coming up of my show in New York with a nonprofit called Out of the Box Theatrics, and thinking about long-term strategy for how do I want to establish the brand and grow the brand. And I also had been hearing a lot about TikTok and influencers and creators. So I started spending time on TikTok and going down rabbit holes and watching videos and seeing this sort of very strong community and welcoming community of theater TikTok folks. And I was introduced to Brandon's content and saw him talking a lot about branding and a lot of things that really resonated with me, and new ways of thinking about engaging with these communities. And so I think I just emailed Brandon. I'm trying to remember. I think I just sent an email. I do stuff like that all the time, and because I'm pretty scrappy, and said I'd love to talk to you about what you're doing and a new way of doing things and how do we engage this community, because I know I'm in an environment now where everything we see kind of come up and getting a lot of support behind it tends to be branded and, IP based material, and I'm coming at this with non-branded content and a completely original musical. So I'm tasked with having to build that brand from scratch. And what is the best way to do that? Also having a show that is about reclaiming authentic happiness in a social media filtered world that lives so much in the social media space. It felt like a really good use of marketing dollars to do that. So we started strategizing ahead of this round of, well ahead of this round of production. And we can talk more about how Brandon sort of came into the picture and orchestrated all of the touch points that we had throughout it and how we're looking to work together going forward. But Brandon, did I miss anything about our origin story?
That sounds great. Yeah.
Tell it from your point of view,
Sure.
Brandon. When she reached out to you, what was your response?
I was really excited. I am in a place where I'm having lots of conversations with artists, with theater companies, with producers all day about these ideas that we're going to be speaking about today. And it's the kind of thing where if a lot of people don't buy in, frankly, right? And because we're in an industry where if things have been done the same way for a very long time. And so to hear that someone was my videos were resonating with someone out there reminds me A, why I make videos online, because it works, and B, that there are folks who are ready to change the way we approach building communities for theater. And I was really excited to have that conversation. And, Nico's background that she alluded to also is very intersectional, just like mine is. And so I think we very quickly got on the same page about like, yeah, this can't just be a creative conversation. This needs to be a kind of full-on business meets creative. And that's something special about Nico and all the hats she's wearing, is actually allowed our process to move very quickly, because there weren't approvals from like 5 different hierarchical organizations, which I'm typically used to when I'm working maybe with a Broadway show or something. So that was exciting, and how we got off to the races.
I just want to say to the room that remember to keep your video off. It's become like there's an epidemic of people turning their videos on right now. I'm going crazy turning everybody off. So just remember that. I want to just mention to you, Brandon, that TikTok terrifies me because I can't dance. Now I find out that it's not just about dancing. So enlighten me on there are different worlds of TikTok, aren't there? It seems.
Very much so. TikTok has literally everything on it. I think a way to think about TikTok is similar to the way you might think about YouTube. It's that diverse and that large scale. You're basically combining the power of YouTube and video with an amazing community that is driven by particularly short form video. Though now it's really emerged beyond 15 seconds, and most videos are, around a minute or so long, and you could even post up to 3 or 10 minutes if you'd like. And it's really powered by that amazing community and a really, really smart algorithm that gets to know what you like really well.
A little scary, but yeah, okay.
And it is a little bit scary. But I think what's special about TikTok and where theater really thrives in it is because it's about community, and it's about people having conversations in the comments, people using the features of TikTok, which are very innovative, called duets or stitches that allow you to combine your thoughts with other people's videos, and kind of knit this tapestry together. And ultimately, the way I like to describe TikTok is it's a modern day Homeric culture. The Odyssey took hundreds, if not thousands of years to be written orally, but TikTok videos explode in the way the Odyssey did in a day. But I really like to help people understand that, because it helps you realize that it's actually a very human platform, because it's tapping into our creativity and our joy of sharing with others and building off each other. And that's why I hope people can start to feel less afraid of it once they realize it's actually very human.
Well, it's very human in the fact that I'm beginning to realize that it's not based on still photography. You don't post pictures. You actually post videos like YouTube. So one thing that I want people to understand about you is you've created a persona, a TikTok persona. You do a series of I don't know how often do you post them? He narrates content about what's going on in theater, and he always, you find things that you like to focus on, things that are exciting to you, and then you talk about them, and we watch you talking about them, and you sometimes elaborate it with background movements and other people's, that's stitching, right? You have other people's videos in there sometimes, or is that duetting?
Yeah, it's a mixture together, but yeah. So ultimately, for me, my journey on
you notice I'm struggling to understand this.
Yeah. So my journey on TikTok, started just like a lot of people's, where we were exploring it a lot during COVID, mostly as a creative outlet. I was actually using the app back when it was called Musical.ly, which is what it was before it became TikTok. And so that was, 7-8 years ago, which had a really unique movement language, actually, that young people created on the platform. So I was very interested in it. But then back in COVID, I kind of got reacquainted with the app and was wanting to share lots of different type of videos about dance or theater. And what really took off is when I started a persona where I introduced myself to the community and said, "Hi, I'm your TikTok theater dad." and I wore my blue light glasses to make me kind of look a little bit more professorial. And I gained like 10,000 followers in like 3 days. And it was kind of, at that time, was a lot, given the size of the platform. And everything kind of blew up from there. And I was really focused on supporting young theater makers with tips. And we did a lot of really different types of initiatives where I even held auditions on TikTok and had Zoom callbacks with them. And we danced and we did song interpretation.
Let me clarify this in case anybody doesn't understand. The persona that I was talking about is the theater guy, theater dad. But you also have a whole series of TikTok videos of your choreography. So let's go back to that and just remember that Brandon is a choreographer and he makes art.
Yes,
in addition to making narratives.
Yes, in addition to all of the strategy work and stuff I do, I am an artist. And so but I think that's also an interesting thing for us to even talk about if we get there, about this balance and that challenge of doing that online. But I think that, so I created that persona at first, and that's what was really working. But then I also wanted to share some of my own work. So I was doing that as well. And that persona, I started to pull away from it a little bit while still using some of the tactics that hooked people, because I wanted to be more of myself, right? And I wanted people to know me as a more full human. And so I continued, though, to really focus on using the platform to educate audiences, to understand the process of making theater and dance. Because, the lesson for me is that I believe if we better inform our audience and make them smarter, they're actually going to be more engaged in the art we make. And that's kind of the whole angle of my profile. And so I do a lot of videos now focusing on choreography, where I show maybe a performance from the Tonys, for example, and then I'm over it in the corner narrating it and explaining to people, hey, like, this is what it took maybe for Casey Nicola to think about using the stage in this way, right? Because we take for granted in theater how little people know about what it actually takes to make something of what we make. And so that's mostly what I focus on now, and also taking people behind the scenes. And I partner with other shows to share their journeys as they're making the show. And so that's kind of bleeds a little bit into what I wanted to help other creators do and help a lot more shows do, which is why I started this company. So that it's not just me making the videos, but now we kind of have a fleet of creators that we can bring in to help support other shows.
And all this comes under the heading of one company, which is Constellation, with a small c, by the way. Yeah. And so Constellation is partly the company that helped Nico, but it's also the company that you used to create your own creative productions, your own dance productions, your own stage productions, your own whatever multimedia.
Yeah, I think the best way to think of it is like a architecture firm that has like an in-house creative wing and then a outside client wing. So for me, like Constellation Theatrical is where we're working client side, and then my own work also is able to sit under that company because it's very much in conversation with it and thinking about how we can create these multidisciplinary experiences.
So Nico, when you approached him at first, did you have a clear idea? And you have a marketing background. So did you have an idea of the areas that you wanted to address in terms of branding your show? And did he change any of those ideas?
Yeah, I mean, the thing that's really cool about theater generally, but then also this conversation is, I mean, we talk all the time and strategize. And as we learn new information, or if there's a new addition to the team, how does that change? What are our assets? So it's very in flux all the time. But, I, like you, I don't really use TikTok as a creator. So I just want to make sure that you don't have to be afraid of this. I spent a lot of time consuming content and lurking. There's a couple of videos of my cat. I mean, it's really pretty basic. And I've played around a little bit, but I was watching how impactful it was to see people organically talking about the shows that they were seeing, and like truly passionate, and very respectful of the industry too. I mean, that was one thing that really struck me, was almost a level that we're not even seeing from the critics community at this point, but people saying, no, we're not going to talk about a show before previews are over. We know they're still making changes. People saying things like, this wasn't for me, but here's what I thought was good about it. And just, I was struck by how thoughtful the theater TikTok community was and how tight knit. And I watched what Shucked did kind of in real time as it was happening. I don't know, Bob, if you know this, but when Shucked was sort of on its way to Broadway, they invited a few of the members of this community to come in and see a dress rehearsal. I think it was the last dress rehearsal before they moved into the theater. And that kind of started a whole conversation and really, I think, ignited a conversation about how excited people were for Shucked. Because again, they in a similar position to me of building a brand, original comedy, and having to do that from scratch. And so they were bringing influencers, creators, and whatever term you want to use into the process to see that. And we are not in theater typically very good at opening up our process, right? Like we want to keep everything really behind closed doors until it's perfect. And then we get to previews and we get some audience feedback. But I thought this is really interesting to take the approach of actually letting people in and then trusting that community to be respectful about the process. And so that was one of the things that Brandon and I started talking about right away, was what if Shucked had done this one step ahead, or two steps back, rather, from just before they went on to Broadway, right? And started inviting people into the process earlier. And what if that was part of the brand building for this show, was opening up the process so that people could see it and interact with it?
Well, historically, people have not been as respectful as you're saying that TikTok community is. Historically, it's been very hard to actually not have all these people critiquing your work while you're in rehearsals. So I don't know. Why do you think the TikTok community is more respectful, Brandon? How has that happened?
I think partially it's just the nature of the platform, and that it really is a community, which is very different from other social platforms. People feel connected to each other in like a real deep, tangible way. And I think also there's also this tension that lives for the creators, right? Who, they understand they want theater to win, right? And I think that's something that a lot of folks and producers and forget a lot of the time when they're scared of sharing, is there's a lot of people out there that want to help you win, right? Like, I want to help you win. I have no interest in saying that your show isn't ready or is bad. Like, why would I want to do that, right? So, and more, yes,
maybe it's generational, because my generation was vicious.
There certainly are some people who do that, but they don't get invited to shows, right? And so there is a little bit of a feedback loop there that happens, right? Like, if you're going to be negative towards shows, that company is no longer going to invite you to shows, because then they're scared you're going to be negative about their show online, right? So it's a very obvious, clear feedback there.
It's been a genuine frustration in the theater for like decades now. It really, I'm glad there's this light that you're shining in terms of TikTok, but gotta say that the usual experience has been, you try very hard to be private in developing your show. You try to stay out of the limelight, and inevitably somebody just comes in and just posts something on social media and says what a mess the show is. And it's like,
and to speak to that,
thank you for that.
No, but I think it's very real, right? And I don't want to pretend that doesn't still happen or couldn't still happen, right? And so why I started this company is because I think we can be really precise about how we invite people into our process, and that actually allows for this community that is accepting to exist. And there's a lot of breaking down of barriers that we're doing here, where we're really actively trying to help folks realize that a raw, authentic sharing of your process, while it may seem so antithetical to what you're typical to, actually allows the audience to connect to you and is going to be less negative because they understand it's not done, right? And they become invested in it long in advance, right? If you are just going to drop a music video 3 weeks before you open on Broadway and expect that to just be the thing, people will maybe be negative if they don't like it, right? Because they don't have a connection with you, right? But if they get to know you, they see you as a collaborator, right? And so what we really preach about at Constellation is treating our audiences like collaborators, not consumers. And that is a huge switch and paradigm shift that I think the industry needs to take, so that it's no longer just about this take your money, get you in the theater, goodbye. It's we're building a durational relationship with you through all these different mediums. And social is just one, and TikTok even below that is just one way that we can do that.
Well, that brings up a point, because, you know, I guess, like I said, I've done these conversations over the years, and over the years, the general wisdom has been that don't look at social media as a sales tool. Look at it as an engagement tool.
Yeah, let's talk about this.
Yeah, let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. So I think with that, it's a great question and conversation to have. And I think we're transparently right in the thick of trying to prove this out. And I think that, to Nico's point, and, you know, she'll jump in here as I want to speak more to like what our strategy was, you know, and how we really in nuts and bolts broke it down here, because I think it gets to this idea that you're talking about, Bob. So I think if you think about this as a lot of like pre-awareness, it starts to make a lot of sense, right? And we start to think about how we can be really building this brand for an original show in the way that people might already know a jukebox musical or a IP-based musical, right? That's kind of what our goal is to do. And so it does take a lot of this awareness, but I think there's a mentality shift that can happen where we begin to understand that is immensely valuable, right? And you're actually not going to get the ticket sales unless we do this first. And I think that we as a culture are in that place. This generation of audience is not going to just buy a ticket to a show and spend over $150 just because you say it's good, even if it's phenomenal. They're just not going to do it unless it has a star in it or it is with a major property. That is no judgment on shows that use stars or major properties. I think they're amazing and part of the ecosystem and are a big part of what we need to be producing right now. But that's not what every show needs, right? So we really wanted to come in with kind of this multi-tiered approach to invite very specific creators into the Millennials process. And so we picked 3 different women who we love, Kate Ranking, Ashley Hufford, and Kaisha Hooley, who are fantastic on TikTok. And we saw them as kind of mirrors of the 3 main characters in the show.
And Kara, don't forget.
Oh, and Kara, sorry.
Yeah.
So let me just say, do they qualify as influencers? Is this the influencer concept?
Yeah, for clarification, I use the word creator, not influencer, because I think we are creative forces. We don't just tell people things. And that's another thing that I like to help people switch their language up a little bit.
We used to call them yentas, influencers.
Yeah, so because we are all influencers, we all tell each other things and people make decisions on what we say, and creators are creative, right? And so, yeah, so our main 3, thanks Nico, were Kara DiPietro, Kaisha Hooley, and Ashley Hufford. They were invited to multiple steps in our process and given access that no one else had access to, and invited to make videos about their experience in the rehearsal room in those moments. We were able to do that. We had some videos, 2 from Kara, for example, one that had 50,000 views, another that had 25,000 views, right? Really creating a massive awareness for the show, which was our goal. But it was really important to us that we were building this long bridge, right? So that it's not just hiring a creator to say, hey, come to this show, buy a ticket. Oh, you know that Kara's been here. You start to love these videos. Now you may get to know the show better. Now you may buy a ticket, right? Because we're aware, to your point, Bob, that it is a tough transactional push, right? So I think we really need to set up all those building blocks. And so we have it both with those main creators. And then we were also inviting a larger swath of creators to the show and hoping that they would post about it. And then created really special, personalized goodie bags for them with the show's logo, with their name on it, which was fun. And those are just some of the tactics that we were using to bring in people. Nico, if there's anything you want to expand on or clarify.
In particular, I'd like to know whether there were any other pieces of your marketing strategy. This seems to be a very specific one, and it seems to be the dominant one.
Yeah, so kind of holistically, because this was within the framework of a nonprofit that was producing this piece, this was sort of more of an overarching taking this strategy beyond, because we knew that there were going to be steps beyond this developmental nonprofit, round of this production. So we wanted to set ourselves up long term, and this obviously took the buy-in of the nonprofit organization. It took the buy-in of the cast, stage management. I mean, this was something that even though I could say I want to do this, you still have to sell it internally with everybody. And there were less stakeholders in this situation, but it was very tactical, because we thought we want to have this journey with these three women representing different perspectives. So we had them at the table reading, the Wandle Probe, and then we also had folks at a tech rehearsal. And then people came back once the show opened. So you could follow, up to 4 videos of their experience seeing the show come to life. And then we had some of the creators invite some of their audience to the tech rehearsal. So then we had more videos that came out of that. And so this is all kind of part of a bigger strategy. Obviously there would be press and there would be all these other things. One piece that we didn't tell of the story is that we dealt with COVID. I actually got COVID for my first time during rehearsals, which sucked. So I'm with you, Bob. I know what it's like. But we had to cancel a few of our previews, and that lost us some of the reviewers that we had coming. And we weren't able to get them back because they're not coming back for a short little 2-week run. So it ended up being a great thing. I mean, beyond anything else, that we had this piece going on, because organically we had videos and sort of organic reviews that were coming from people. Some of my favorite quotes that came for the show were through those videos of some of the folks that we just invited in who weren't kind of part of our core team. So but I think Brandon will talk about this more, but our thought is having these people be almost an extended member of your marketing team, at least the one, and that's how we treated them, the 3 who are a part of it. And again, very respectful. We didn't tell them what to say. We weren't, the idea was not, hey, go talk about how great this was. We wanted genuine, authentic reactions to the process. And that is a risk. I had 3 creators with massive social followings at my table reading. Brandon can tell you I was freaking out about that and going, is this a good idea? I don't know if this is a good idea, but I had to trust in the material. I had to take the artist hat off for a second and just sort of trust in the material and trust in the team that had been built and that it was going to resonate. And somehow we had a really great first table read. I've never seen that happen before.
Well, also,
So,
Nico,
yeah.
your subject matter and your title are they're in harmony with those people. I would think.
Yeah, well, I don't want to out anyone's ages, but I believe that most of the community may not identify as millennials. Actually, I think we have some Gen Z.
You had 2 of 3. Kara's a bit younger, but Ashley and Kaisha were squarely in the demographic. Yeah.
Yes. I think
that doesn't hurt.
It doesn't hurt. No, but I think that, this is a show that really speaks to millennial women. And I think that a lot of people, and I found that people found their way into the show in different ways, but we sort of knew who our core demographic was. And that was one of the reasons that those were the folks that we invited into the process. And we knew, Brandon has these relationships and knows the types of stuff that they're putting out there, that they are respectful of the process. Many of them are in the industry themselves as actors otherwise, and so they know what the behind the scenes is and how a show can evolve over time. So definitely it was a huge trust fall in a lot of ways, as an artist, to go, okay, I'm going to trust this and we're going to do this in a controlled way, but in a way that is authentic and makes sense for this show.
So I'm gonna be more direct in the question, because I've
Sure.
sort of danced around this 3 times so far. Brandon, to you, do you ever use social media platforms other than TikTok for marketing purposes?
Oh, yes, for sure.
Okay.
I think that this is, there's just there's a lot to talk about here, right, in the constellation. So I think for us, it's really important as a company that we're thinking about each platform very distinctly, and really telling a different story on each platform. I've worked with another client who, we're using each platform very creatively, and they're as extensions of the show in a way that I typically don't see other theatrical properties doing, and that's something that we're talking about right now.
Talk about specifically some of the other social media platforms and what you think their strengths are.
Sure. So I think that, Instagram obviously is definitely an opportunity for photo forward, but is also similar to TikTok with Reels right now. So there doesn't need to be that necessarily different of a strategy right now than TikTok, because they're basically copying it. So my thing actually with Instagram is thinking about just who your demographic is and what platform they might just be on. That's actually what's most important to me, right? So for us, we may find a lot of our audience, and because we love targeting like millennial mothers on Instagram, right? So we also invited some like mommy bloggers who are bigger, much bigger on Instagram than they are on TikTok. And so we have to create a strategy that is flexible to work with them. Because that's actually where I think a lot of the people that are going to fall in love with the show live, right? Then, Twitter, we don't know because it may not exist in a few 6 months. But right, how can we creatively use text, right? So it's not just like, hey, I'm talking about the show. How can we maybe tell some sort of story via text, or use it from a particular character's perspective? That's something I like to talk about with different shows. And so that's just some examples of how you might use different ones. We're just hyper focused on TikTok because that's where I live mostly, and where I think you have the most opportunity to be discovered.
So I'm going to say
that on the other platforms.
I'm going to say something that's going to make me sound very old. What about Facebook? Now, I understand the demographic of Facebook, but the demographic of Facebook is actually a ticket buying demographic.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I think, again, it comes down to what is your show, right? I've been working with a lot of shows right now that the demographic skews very young. So we don't even talk about Facebook, honestly, right?
There's a title for you. We don't talk about Facebook.
We don't talk about Facebook, right? And there's a funny joke in the show about this itself, right? But for sure, right? If we're moving towards a potential commercial run, like for any show, we need to consider Facebook, because those people, we want them to come buy tickets, right? But they don't need this type of community gathering in the way that we can build elsewhere, right? So TikTok is where you build that community, and then you're able to bridge it out elsewhere through these other platforms, and let your TikTok audience kind of be your army and advocates on those other platforms. It's kind of super high level how I might suggest thinking about it.
Now,
So
I don't want you to titter, but we actually had somebody talk about LinkedIn about six or 8 months ago.
So,
she had very compelling arguments.
LinkedIn is
I post on LinkedIn.
No, LinkedIn is very legit. And maybe there's a way for us to use it creatively. I think maybe honestly for this show, it could fit because of the material, and we like create because we've been talking about creating like fake accounts based from the characters' perspectives. LinkedIn's fantastic. I think it's just a matter of thinking about your audience and what's worth spending time on, because I also like to be really realistic with clients that this costs money, right? And I realize, so the more we add, the more expensive it's going to be. And so we just have to think about what's actually worth our time.
Well, and so I just want to say quickly, couple things. I post on LinkedIn. I have my long marketing career, but I post there mostly kind of big announcements, people in the business world that I've used to work with that may be excited about the things that I'm doing now. But I absolutely think that there's a voice to be had on LinkedIn. And then in addition to that, I have my biggest audience on Facebook. So, I'm elder millennial. That's where I have the most people. I absolutely use it. And I think the difference is we weren't trying, of course, selling tickets is great, but that wasn't the primary objective of this round, was not selling tickets. That's going to be down the road when we're trying to sustain a production. We wanted people in the audience who were going to give us great feedback. We wanted industry folks. We wanted, butts and seats, but it was less about the ticket sales. I absolutely think that Facebook is a part of that strategy if that's what you're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, especially because of the ability to actually track people and use ads on Facebook, like really powerful in a way that's actually much more successful than TikTok. And I just want to underline again what Nico just said, like thinking very clearly about what is the actual goal, right? Is it awareness or is it to drive ticket sales? I've been in conversations with folks where it is one or the other, right? When we're talking about raising awareness, when we're far out from a commercial production, and also, even though, yes, we want to sell tickets to this run, it's very hard to sell tickets to a show using social media when the run is only 3 weeks, right? Because that post that Ashley made, someone may see it now, right? And just in the way that the algorithm works, right? So I'm honest with clients. I say, that's not what is going to really pay dividends here. So let's think about planting the seeds and awareness. Other times, if I'm working with a Broadway show, for example, and I'm pitching myself personally as a creator, they really are hiring me, right? Because they think I'm going to help sell them tickets, right? And I want to help sell them tickets. So we create a package where I'm trying to drive people to buy a ticket. How do I do that? I personally like to do that by selecting a few different videos that I know tend to do really well on my account, particularly these choreography breakdowns. I say, hey, if you guys give me B-roll of your show, I can talk over it. These videos, like always, always have over 10,000 views. I have ones that have 800,000 views. Like, these are super valuable. Let's do a series. Let's have me meet the choreographer of the show. And then let's do a special night where people are buying a ticket to the show, but they also do a talk back with me and the creative team. And so now, like, you literally are getting them to buy a ticket because I'm attached, right? And that's valuable to the show because they actually secured a ticket. And it's valuable to me because they're actually helping me build my community and build a closer connection. And I want to create cool experiences for my community, right? So that's the sort of package that I'm pitching tons of Broadway shows right now. And I'm trying to get them to sign on to, because I think that is the most profit-making thing. And that's what we at Constellation are trying to do. One of other Nico's points, I think that our difference is that I am a creator, right? I actually understand the fluency of the platform and I make videos for it every single day. And you can tell the difference between videos that I make for shows versus a large marketing company. It just has a different feel. And I think that feel helps drive sales.
Well, I think I'm a good enough of a marketer to know that I don't know how to make them videos.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I bring in people like Brandon. I will also say, this is going to be news to Brandon too. Apparently, my kid's camp counselor had heard of the show on TikTok. So now my kids think I'm famous. Thank you, Brandon.
There you go. That's all that matters.
That's all that matters.
Eric Rothman has a ton of questions, but for you, I think we might have moved too fast about your show. He wants to know what the name of the show is. What is the timeline? Where was it? When was it? And what is the state of it now? So
the state of it. So really quickly, so millennials are killing musicals. And you can go to killingmusicals.com and you can see some production photos and stuff like that. We did a limited run with Out of the Box Theatrics for 2 weeks, and that was at Theater 71 on the Upper West Side. We have an album coming out on Yellow Sound label that will be in September, and we have our first single will drop at the end of August, and so that's a huge thing that Brandon and I are strategizing on right now, is that video of that song, and then also the rest of the album. And in the meantime, in active discussions about sort of what the team looks like moving forward, but definitely eyes on our commercial production as a next step. And I'm happy to chat individually with anyone who's interested on the specifics of what that looks like, but we can keep going.
Okay, well, I'm going to, because we're at 6:19, I'm going to try to get some of these questions in. I don't know if I'm going to do all of Eric's questions, but he does want to know, Brendan, what projects did you do in the Venice Festival?
Sure. Yeah. So I was a co-creator of a virtual reality project called Queerskins Arc. That was a part of Venice VR and Cannes. And it is a part of the larger Queerskins transmedia universe, about a fictional character in the 80s who is living with AIDS. And in this episode, the second episode of the series, you have the opportunity to essentially jump into the journal pages of his life with him and his boyfriend. And it kind of all manifests itself as this duet that you're seeing between the two of them that happens all around you. And it's meant to be experienced in a 30-foot room with wireless VR. So as you move through the space, the choreography changes in orientation and in sequencing as you move through the space. So everyone who experiences the project is going to have a completely new experience with it. And so I like to think you're co-choreographing with me across time and space. So that's a whole nother part of my life that I do work like that, focused on movement and extended reality, which we could talk about for another 3 hours. But that is that project in particular.
He wants to, God, there's a lot of questions. How often do you need to post to TikTok for it to begin to click? What is your recommended? What is more than once a day, once a day?
It kind of depends, and it's always changing, right? We were in a period where if you asked me that a couple years ago, I'd say there are people posting like nonstop 9 times a day, and they're the ones that are growing, right? But now we're in a period where we're not even at a once a day period anymore. Like you can do that, and it helps. I think you just need to do, I like to say, what you're able to do. I would say if you can commit to at least once a week, you're going to be in a good space. And it just is a matter of where you are in your process, right? Like, we're about to launch the Millennials TikTok. So like, we're going to make sure we have enough videos for like a heavy amount of videos in the beginning. And then our plan is to trickle to a slower rate, just to keep the account like alive. So the app doesn't totally kill our momentum, because yes, the algorithm cares. And there are these things called like,
there's another title for you, the algorithm cares.
Yeah. Like there's this idea of like heating your account in quotes, where like the algorithm's like, you're really cool right now, we're going to blow it up. And for a week, you really want to be on it because every video you're making seems to go viral, but yeah.
Oh, and are you there to actually ask some of the questions? I think we'll come back to some of Eric's questions. We just did 2 of them, but there's other questions in the chat I'm beginning to see.
Sure, the first question I think has been answered a little bit in the chat, but RK asks, how do you measure success for a project, and does it translate to income/profitability?
Yeah, I think that we kind of spoke to it a little bit before. I think it comes down to what we in our first conversation, if we're collaborating, we're going to have that conversation, right? I'm going to ask you that, right? I'm going to want to know what that means to you, so I can create a strategy that leads to that. And we want to understand the duration we're working together, and what those goals are, right? So for us, for Millennials, we were really more hyper-focused on awareness, knowing that this is just the first stop for the show. and that we're hoping that now people at least know what it is. So when we introduce the album to them, they're like, oh, that show. And then they're hopefully the album kind of has a life, so that when maybe it has a commercial life, people actually know what the show is when they actually can spend money on it. I have a whole other thing to talk about with how I think we can be monetizing people much earlier, but that, again, we can have another conversation about that.
Okay.
A future town meeting or
Yeah.
Owen, next up.
Next from Nils, what are some channels on TikTok that you think are doing a great job promoting their shows?
Yes, great question. Being put on the spot like this is, of course, going to make it really challenging for me to think of them. I think things, examples to look towards are, there's this huge TikTok kind of founded musical called Epic the Musical, which is actually being produced right now by Blair Russell, and is written by Jorge Herranz.
Do you want me to bring Blair on?
Blair, so Blair and I are close collaborators.
I had no idea.
yeah,
He teaches our foundations class.
Yeah, so Blair's amazing. He believes in all of this. We've worked together on his projects before. And that show is a really phenomenal example of just how you can see how tight a community can build just by sharing your process online. We also there's this, another thing Nico and I were talking about is this Dance Moms musical that just kind of popped off in the last couple months. That's a parody. And they did a really great job of creating really organic feeling videos. That's called The Pyramid Musical, if you find them on TikTok. I appreciate, there's a Lady Macbeth musical that's coming out of the UK right now. How
about a look back at the Ratatouille musical?
Yeah, right. So that's kind of the original conversation, right? I think the difference in where people cross their wires a little bit sometimes, right, is that was a collaboratively written musical on the platform that I think showcased why TikTok was special, which is different from a show that's being written by one creator sharing their process, right? So you could also talk about, the Bridgerton musical and what Emily Bear and Abigail Barlow did. So, but those are just a few at the top of my head. And, in our conversations, and Nico and I literally just had this yesterday, we're kind of taking little bits of all these different elements and understanding what we can do, because, hey, if we don't have a writer, or we don't have a person at the center that can make the videos, we have to shift strategy, right? Or if we have this other asset that we could use that they don't have, oh, let's lean into that, right? So it kind of depends. I also want to shout out American Ballet Theater, in my opinion, has the best arts organization TikTok, like in the country. I learn a lot from them.
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
How does the Wednesday dance TikTok compare to what you do? I mean, because that was a phenomenon, like, what, 2 months ago?
Yeah, or like in the fall, probably. Yeah,
Was it that long ago? Yeah.
Yeah, it was that long ago. I think
I forgot I was on vacation.
The viral churn moves on, right? So I would say, yeah, I think that's another example of the power of the platform and thinking about the Homeric nature. I think that Wednesday Dance kind of speaks to that. And yeah, and Gregory in the chat put in a bunch of creators who are really fantastic. Many of these folks are my friends.
I was going to say, if you look at some of these, you'll see some videos about millennials.
Yeah. I wasn't shouting them out because I was speaking about show accounts specifically, because it's different, but these are some fantastic creators. Yeah.
I do want to say, just so it's not lost in the conversation, that I think what's really exciting to me, and I think Blair is another person who is really standing on the forefront of this, is that we're just starting to see the leap over from TikTok to stage, right? I think that we have kind of seen the bubbling up of what can be with things like Bridgerton and Epic and sort of in development, but we haven't really seen sort of all the way through. And Brandon and I have talked about this a lot, of being kind of on the forefront of like staying within the traditional lanes of, you know, what the path of development in New York looks like, but then also creating the communities at the same time and kind of coming up for a script of what that looks like. Because I think that is, and I think Blair is another person who's really thinking about that too. And can I shout out our panel that we're doing, or Brandon, do you want to shout that out?
Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
So we're going to be, Blair and I will be on a panel of Brandon's at Broadway Con, July 23rd, Sunday, and talking about this very thing. So if you're interested in hearing more and hearing Blair's perspective on it, he'll be there for that too.
Good to know. Owen, any of the Eric's questions we want to go back to, or anything
I
else?
think he sent those to you. I've only got one more from Greg.
Oh, you don't have it. Oh, okay.
Where do you both see creator slash influencer style marketing going in the future for theater?
Yeah, big question. I would say, in my opinion, you know, this is obvious, I think obvious, is I believe this is the future of how we need to have market shows. I think that building from the inside around community is the way the next major hits are going to be born. We see the hints of that in all around us. We see it in shows like Six. We see it in the way that this generation just likes to interact online, right? In the way people use Discord, in the way that people are in Minecraft and Roblox. People like to just, the younger generation, who I'm very invested in making them theater audiences. This is the type of way they like to be spoken to. If you're going to make a financial transaction with them, you need to earn it. And so I think you're going to see more of this in the future. And I think you're actually going to see it in this awareness realm, and less pressure on a influencer is hired to just sell a ticket. Because I think people are going to realize that it's actually more helpful to bring them in as collaborators. What I'm trying to make happen as well, and I'm hopeful for, is that I think that there should be a me in every Broadway show's rehearsal room, all of them, every day. I think it's an essential part of the process. I think all of the logistics and the union alarm bells that maybe start to go off for people, I think all of that needs to be solved. This is all a part of contracting and things that need to happen well in advance, which is why it's really challenging when a show calls me and says, come save our show, we are open already, because it makes it really hard to make videos. And I think we should be paying actors for their time to participate, and we should be paying that creator to be in that rehearsal room.
That raises one of the questions that Eric brought up, which is, are there any issues with the unions in terms of all of this?
It's totally a challenge, and it's very real. And that's why I really, really like to drive home that I want to be a part of your process early. For me, my ideal is that we are over a year out from doing something commercial, right? I think we're going to be on a really durational journey with millennials, which is really exciting because we're going to be able to showcase this for other people. And I think we need to be able to have these sort of strategic conversations before any union contract is signed, because I deeply believe it needs to be written into people's contracts. Otherwise, it is going to be a mess.
It's the expectation that the participants in the show participate on TikTok.
I think if you want to share any process from the rehearsal room, you need to get approval from anyone in a union in that rehearsal room, particularly equity, right?
Right.
So the best way to do that is to put it in the contract that on select days, there will be someone recording video in the room. And if you're signing a contract to be in this show, you are agreeing to this. And it's in your contract and we have it settled. That's not to say that it's not a collaborative process with those actors or the creative folks at all. It's just getting all of that messiness done way in advance so that it allows, so things aren't surprising, when they come down the pipe. If you want to make a video, another really big success we had on that particular point is I took over the TikTok for K-pop late in their journey. And we had a tremendous explosion of success once I kind of joined that team. And what we were able to do is essentially do like a TikTok call, which is what we called it. And so kind of just like a dance call or a fight call, we had a TikTok call. And so for that 30 minutes, I said, here's all the videos I'm hoping to shoot today, cast. Who wants to come? Totally voluntary, or like, but we're going to do it in the half hour before half hour. Come on down and let's film it. And then they all knew this is when we're doing it. We can fit it into our day. Done. It just has to be really organized, you know, and then we're able to make things happen.
And I will say, because this came up for us, I do not believe, because our stage managers looked into it, I don't think that there is a set social media fee for off-Broadway equity. However, there is a social media fee that can get added in for a Broadway contract from an equity perspective. So I know that this is already being thought about.
And K-pop, for example, had that in their contract. Yeah.
And I do want to answer Greg's question from my perspective, like where I see it going, because I think, you know, I have a different perspective. I'm focused on, as a producer and writer, I'm focused on this project, right? So I see this as a huge part of our strategy, but also, you know, thinking bigger in terms of how it all weaves together, press and marketing. And, you know, it is not, I don't think it ever should be the only strategy. And I think people hear millennials, they go, oh, those kids, that is part of the thing. We're middle-aged now, guys.
Yeah.
We're millennial moms are 30s, 40s. Like this is a great ticket buying age. So I know we keep talking about the young people, but I do think a lot of our audience is actually on Facebook and Instagram. And so some of that is going to shift and change. And it'll be a different conversation than something that's really aimed at, you know, high schoolers, right? That might have the big Discord communities around it. So I think I see it as part of a bigger strategy, but also something, again, that I'm very excited because of the subject matter of the show and the opportunity to do something that I see as being, you know, incredibly impactful, really budget friendly by baking it into the process as we go along, versus what Brandon's saying of like, emergency, we need to bring Brandon in at the last minute to save the day. And it's already paid off in, you know, just in dividends as far as having those quotes from folks that came. I truly believe that as artists, we create champions one person at a time. And I think that TikTok is a really great way to have that happen. So.
Oh, I'm going to go back to one of Eric's questions. He asks, what do you think is the future of XR in theater? What do you see as next things coming? And in particular, he wants to know, what is your view of Apple Vision Pro and Threads?
Sure. Okay. Lots of different things there. So I'll try to walk through them. So yeah, so as I spoke to a little bit at the top, a big part of the work I do is kind of at this intersection of extended reality and performance. So that's thinking about virtual reality, augmented reality, et cetera. And for me, I believe it's a lot of my beliefs are very similar to what we've been talking about here today, which is why this company has all of these things together and it makes sense to me. And they don't feel like separate production companies, because we have an opportunity in creating XR theatrical projects that allow us to not just really immerse our audiences in our story in a way that they've never been able to before, but also to reach audiences across the world in ways that we have not really been able to before. And really go beyond just streaming a copy of your show, but allowing them to enter your world and create a new, unique experience for them. And I also believe that and I've been speaking a lot about demographics, right? That a young audience is the folks who are really falling in love with devices like the Meta Quest, right? And they love it for the gaming aspects. And you might put them into a theatrical project, one such as The Under Presents, which is made by a theater company and actually had a theatrical run of The Tempest a couple years ago, which was highly successful. They don't see it as theater in the way that they see going to a play in person, but it helps them fall in love with what theater can be. And I believe it's a fantastic gateway to get them to go to a physical theater. It's by meeting them potentially at home. I would also add to that theater makers and dance makers are such the perfect people to be making in XR. That's why I am the XR creative producer at an organization called Musical Theater Factory here in New York City, where I run our one of the nation's only musical theater extended reality programs, where we have sessions where I put you in headsets, we talk about it, we do this sort of strategy, but hyper focused on XR musicals. Because not only can you be building these projects, but you can also be a part of these creative teams that you may not think are theater related, right? Like I can consult on an app for like physical therapy and wellness for office workers because I'm a choreographer and I have the skills that are needed for this landscape. So that's a little bit of my thoughts there. I would say short on Apple Vision Pro, super excited about what it may be, skeptical until I have it on my face. But from insiders, I hear that it's very impressive. And I think just the fact that Apple entered the ring is going to start a renaissance for the XR world, and I'm really excited about it. And then lastly, Threads. We don't know because it's brand new, and I think we have to wait and see. Nico and I talked about Threads for like almost an hour yesterday. And I'm really, really curious to see what their goal is, if it's just to knock out Twitter. But by seeding it with an Instagram audience, which is a visual platform, which is now being turned into a quippy written platform, it's just different people. And I think it's just going to feel very different. I also think it's a very brilliant metaverse play for Meta because of the way they're thinking about the servers, and because of the way they're actually going to create a really profound community on there that they kind of are losing on Facebook. That's my monologue about all those things.
Well, that's amazing. I think we've crammed a lot of information into an hour and 20 minutes, 15 minutes, or whatever it's been. I'm gonna wind up now, but you don't need to leave because we can stay and we can talk a little bit after I wind up the YouTube and podcast viewers here. Just want to thank everybody. I want to thank Brandon Powers and I want to thank Nico Juber, our true friend, for being with us today and covering an immense amount of material. I don't know if anybody else's head is spinning, but I think that I'm probably not the only one. So there's a tremendous amount to think about, tremendous amount to look at and consider using in our own projects going forward. I'm not there yet. It's like we talked about so much. I have to let it all sort of digest at this point. To everybody out there in YouTube and on podcasts, please consider being part of the conversation. As you can see, we really do answer your questions in the room. We like to bring you into the conversation. Just think of all the things you would have asked if you'd been here today and all the answers you would have gotten. So email me at trunltd@aol.com, trunltd@aol.com, and I'll put you on the Zoom list and we'll invite you. I mean, next week we have a conversation about theater for young audiences. I have Barbara Pasternak coming from TheaterWorks USA. She's kind of the head of one of the legendary companies that does works for young people. We're going to talk about the difference between youth theater and family theater as well. A lot to cover next week as well. And in the weeks ahead after that, we have all sorts of people coming in to talk about all sorts of things. I invite you to let me know what you want us to talk about. Always open to hearing suggestions for questions and topics. And we still do this as a community service, which means that you can come for free. And we welcome you for free, but we also call it pay what you can. So if you can pay something, now that we're going into live performance and back into the live world, we have a lot more expenses than we've had for the past 3 years in COVID. So support us with donations by going to truedonate.org, TRUdonate.org. That's truedonate.org. And I hope you'll join us and become part of the community. Thank you all very much, and see you soon, I hope.